All right.
Nahum chapter 1. We'll do a few things about Nahum first. To set the stage, really straightforward things. First off, the book of Nahum is about the destruction of Nineveh, which leads to the ultimate downfall of what nation? Do you know? Assyria. That's exactly right. So we're talking about the destruction of, we're talking about the destruction of Nineveh, which means we're also talking about the destruction of Assyria. Now, who was Assyria? What are some things you know about them?
Basically, God used them to take the divided kingdom, the southern kingdom into, not the southern kingdom, but the northern kingdom into captivity because of their disobedience and adultery.
That's right. To take the...
I couldn't hear.
Did we lock the back door?
Sorry, you all forgot to unlock.
Good evening, Lonnie. Doing well. Yep. So Assyria was famous for taking the northern kingdoms of Israel into captivity, right? That's what we've been studying about in Hosea, in Amos, and several others. Lonnie?
What they called it Assyria at that time? Oh, it was Syria.
Assyria?
What they call it, Syrian or Syria?
Assyria at this time that we're in right here. Right. This would have been, this book of Nahum was written about 620-ish BC. So sometime in the 620s possibly. We know that it would have been, I think, as early as 660 and as late as 612. So, oh, is that what you got to? As early as 660. Yeah, so a lot of people put it somewhere in the middle, around in the 620s. And they say that it would have been a book written to encourage Josiah. And it broke a period of about 40 years of prophetic silence. So that's what a lot of people see Nahum as. The word Nahum, the name, we don't know the exact meaning of it, but we know that the root word means comforter. And so this would have been a message of comfort. So when we read this book, we have to look at it through through that lens. So it's the lens of a prophet writing to Israel concerning one of their most despised enemies, right? An enemy that had threatened Judah, the tribe of Judah, over and over and over again. And specifically, we're going to look at it through the lens of a prophet trying to encourage a young king, Josiah, who was reigning during this time period, to be faithful and to not allow his faith to falter during this potential conflict with Assyria. So this is what we've got going for us here in Nahum chapter 1. All right? So it's all about it's all about the destruction of the city of Nineveh. Now this is why this is significant that we nail down the context of the passage. As we read through the book, some of the language mirrors so strongly that of the language in passages like Revelation and 2 Peter and others that we will be tempted to draw an interpretation that is more for that time period. What we need to learn from this passage, as we've learned from many of them, is that this is simply the way that prophets spoke when they talked about the judgment of a nation. And even though the language and the symbolism is similar between various of these books, we have to keep in mind the very first verse of each, the oracle of Nineveh. This whole book is about the destruction of Nineveh. The way where it fits in for us is we can use the book to survey the language that's used within in order to sharpen our knowledge of how the New Testament authors would use some of this same language to try to use it more consistently. So let's begin. Nahum chapter 1 and verse 1. The oracle of Nineveh, the vision of Nahum the Elkoshite. Nobody has been able to determine where this city was that Nahum was from. They've got a couple different areas that they think it could have been, but they have not nailed it down yet. Some have even suggested that Capernaum means the city of Nahum. So, there's various theories, but nobody has any concrete evidence as to where this village was that Nahum was from. Could have been destroyed by the Babylonians just a few years after this, so they don't have it nailed down. All right, so let's begin in verse 2. Jealous? Lonnie?
Wasn't the Babylon already destroyed in this city?
Yeah, let me put it up here for us so we all got a good knowledge of it here. So, 723 BC. What happened then? Do we know?
723.
Yeah, 723. That's when.
Is that when?
Northern Kingdom went into captivity, right?
Yep. So 723 is when the northern kingdom went into captivity. 612 BC is when the Assyrians were defeated, and they were defeated by the Medes and the Babylonians in 612 BC. Okay, in 606 BC through 586 BC, this is the siege in Jerusalem. There were 3 different sieges in these years. 606, I think it's 596 and 586. And 586 is whenever Jerusalem was destroyed. 539 to 536, this is when Babylon was destroyed. Medes and the Persians. And this would have been, this is the events depicted in Daniel chapter 5, just to let you know. In Daniel, and in 2 Chronicles 36, the latter portion of that. That's 536. 536 is whenever the call is issued for them to go back home. The Medes and the Persians overthrew. But now, but in 612, it was the Medes and the Babylonians that went together to destroy the Assyrians. So we are between 723 and 612 BC, more particularly like 663, I think is what the specific date was. So between 663 and 612 is where we're hanging out right now. And a lot of people, again, put it sometime in the 620s, possibly, maybe in the reign of Josiah. And this book would have been an encouragement to him that they would not be destroyed by the Assyrians, and that God would deliver them from their hands.
Josiah was the king of the southern.
Right. So this 723 is when Israel is destroyed. Right. So this is all about the tribe of Judah.
Right.
The tribe of Judah, which of course was carried away into captivity after this by the Babylonians. So here so what we have in Nahum is God not being angry with Israel at this point. So this must have been a time of peace. This is where Josiah would have been reigning, where he was considered a faithful king who walked in the steps of David. So this is why you have why people put it in Josiah's reign. Ashley, did you have something?
No, I was just thinking Nineveh's repentance was pretty short-lived, apparently.
Well, it's how it is with Israel over and over and over again, right?
Like a lot of us, we be faithful for a little while, and that's all through the Bible, especially with God chosen people.
Right.
Faithful for a little while, and then all of a sudden they back to the same old way.
That's how it goes.
Right.
All right. So Nahum. Now we have to keep in mind this is being written from the perspective of a prophet trying to encourage a young king that he's not going to be destroyed. Now, when you hear a football coach on TV, or maybe you played football or played basketball like I did, and your coach talked to you about the other team, what kind of language do they use? I mean, are they nice about the other team? No, they get you fired up, right? We're going to stomp them. We're going to destroy them. We're going to whoop them. There's nothing they can do. They're just babies compared to y'all. You're going to run them over. So They use all this language. What's it for? To motivate you, right? Get you pumped up. You're ready to go. You're excited at that point. And so Nahum is going to use some of the fiercest language in the Bible that we have about God. And then when we read it, it can be kind of scary when we read that language that's used about God. But the purpose of it is not to warn Josiah, but it's to encourage Josiah. It's like, hey, you got God on your side. Here's what he's going to do to these Ninevites. You just keep on, right? So this is all positioned here, excuse me, to encourage Josiah to be the best king possible, knowing that he has a powerful God on his side that's going to carry him through this whole way. Okay? So that's what we're going to keep in mind. All right, verse 2. He says, a jealous and avenging God is the Lord. The Lord is avenging and wrathful. The Lord takes vengeance on his adversaries, and he reserves wrath for his enemies. The Lord is slow to anger and great in power. And the Lord will by no means leave the guilty unpunished. So what you find in the first part of verse 3 is, he hasn't destroyed him yet, but that doesn't mean that he's not going to. He's just being slow to anger. He's being patient with them. All right? It's going to come. You just be patient yourself. He says, in whirlwind and storm is his way, and clouds are the dust beneath his feet. So you get a picture here of this mighty God that's an unstoppable force. He says in verse 4, he rebukes the sea and makes it dry. He dries up all the rivers. Bashan and Carmel wither. The blossoms of Lebanon wither. Mountains quake because of him, and the hills dissolve. Indeed, the earth is burned. The earth is upheaved by his presence, the world and all the inhabitants in it. Now let's slow down a bit there and remember what this is about. This is about the destruction of Nineveh, right? Nineveh, Nahum chapter 1 and verse 1, the oracle of Nineveh, the vision of Nahum the Elkoshite. Oh, I thought you. Oh, okay, gotcha. So we got to keep in mind that this extreme language, talking about the hills dissolving and the earth burning and all this, is about Nineveh. He's just using over-the-top, hyperbolic language to talk about the fall of one of the mightiest nations in the world at that time, the nation of all nations at that time.
It would have had special meaning to a young king that had a history. His history was involved with such a God.
Right.
Remembering how God brought Israel out of Egypt, and,
right,
and led them through the wilderness 40 years, and they saw these what you would say miraculous feats that God did.
Exactly.
Even while in Egypt, and this was being passed down to and certainly a king of a Jewish nation or Jewish tribe or whatever you want to call it. If he was the king of the southern kingdom, he would have been very much aware of it. That would probably been part of his upbringing.
Ingrained in his history, right?
So not so far. I mean, we look at it as fantastic language, but to a young king that had been brought up with this history, it would have probably been a lot more encouraging to him.
Well, keep in mind, it's definitely encouraging to him because it's showing him who's on his side. Keep in mind, though, that Josiah, remember, it was in his reign that they rediscovered the law in the tabernacle. So a lot of this, while it may have been familiar to him, it may have not as been familiar as it should have been. So it definitely would have been encouraging. Lonnie?
Oh, that's what I was going to bring. And remember, people had forsaken God, and they weren't being taught the thing they should have been taught.
Mm.
You know, they were being taught, but they were doing the wrong thing, because the book had, like you said, that had been hidden, and Josiah was restoring a lot of stuff, and that I think that's when they found the law. They sent them in to clean up the temple and all of that.
Right.
The priests and all of them, and they brought it to him, if I'm not mistaken, and that's when he restored the thing. But as all men that was faithful for a little while, he did the wrong thing to the later.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, keep in mind, so when we read our other passages in the Old Testament, like we've read before, that talk about, the seas the seas being dried up and all the rivers being dried up and the hills dissolving and the earth burning and these things, we got to keep in mind how they're used prophetically to talk about the judgments of nations. And we get so excited when we read these things from a scientific perspective, because scientists tell us about, the sun's going to burn the earth up and things like that. So we automatically go to end of the world type of thing when he's talking about the end of the nation, right? We talk like that though too. My whole world's coming to an end, right? We use similar language.
So that's a lot of stuff in Revelation too, and we have to look at it as God always was using all this language, certain language, but later on you see his people using it and getting into all this symbolic stuff like that. He uses fire and all this stuff as judgment, and such
Right.
like a judgment. He pronouncing what's going to be happening to them, but it's a figurative thing, and it's something literally going to happen, but it's going to be worse than that.
Right.
It's like we know it's fire burn and hurts, but the stuff going to happen to them is going to hurt too.
Yeah, like whenever Assyria was destroyed, we know that the world and all the inhabitants in it didn't burn up, right?
Right.
It's just prophetic language to talk about the end of a great nation. All right, verse 6. Who can stand before his indignation? Who can endure the burning of his anger? His wrath is poured out like fire, and the rocks are broken up by him.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we just have this fantastic language to describe God. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knows those who take refuge in him. So again, he's encouraging Israel, be faithful in this time. Nineveh is going to get what's coming. You just stay faithful yourselves and don't worry about them. But, he says in verse 8, with an overflowing flood, he will make a complete end of its sight. He will pursue his enemies into darkness. So this is, again, they're not going to be able to hide even in the nighttime, right? He's going to pursue them even through the night, continually working even then to stamp out this evil that was in the world. Particularly what we have here, though, is, of course, the nation of Nineveh. All right, verse 9. Whatever you devise against the Lord, he will make a complete end of it. Distress will not rise up twice. In other words, when he destroys Nineveh, they're going to be destroyed. Okay? Like tangled thorns, and like those who are drunken with their drink, they are consumed as stubble completely withered. So you remember, bless you, some of those parables that Jesus taught about the wheat and the tares to be burned up, right? And this is what he's kind of saying here. They're going to be consumed as stubble completely withered. From you has gone forth one who plotted evil against the Lord, a wicked counselor. That verse 10 reminds me of this thing that happened when I was young. We were playing with fireworks in a friend's yard, and it was in the dry time during the summer, and the whole yard just went woof. And that's kind of what the picture is here, right? They're going to be consumed like that.
Did you wear that, did you?
The what now?
Did you wear it?
Wear it? Oh yeah, soot and all that. But I forgot which friend it was that we burned the yard up for. I just can't remember.
Been there, done it.
Yeah, there's probably several. Who knows? All right. From you has gone forth one who has plotted evil against the Lord, verse 11, a wicked counselor. Thus says the Lord, though they are at full strength, and likewise many, even so they'll be cut off and pass away. Though I have afflicted you, I will afflict you no longer. So now I'll break his yoke bar from upon you, and I'll tear off your shackles. So Assyria, though they've been strong and tormenting Judah up to this point, he says no longer are they going to do it. They're going to be destroyed, and you're going to be released from their oppression. Now, unfortunately, because of their wickedness, Babylon was just right around the corner. But here is a moment of hope for them, if they would stay faithful to God. As he said before, if they would find refuge in him, back in verse 7. But they only did that for a short time, unfortunately.
So, the southern kingdom,
Yes,
Nineveh never took them into captivity, correct?
right.
But they afflicted them.
They fought various wars against them, but they didn't take them into captivity as they did Israel.
Okay.
I remember they marched up to the walls and they said, Was it Hezekiah? Give me 10 more years, or
Yeah, it was Hezekiah that God told him he was going to die.
right? So you had several instances where they got right up to the walls, but they always repented before it would happen. Okay, verse 14. The Lord has issued a command concerning you. This is back to Nineveh. Your name will no longer be perpetuated. I will cut off idol and image from the house of your gods. I will prepare your grave, for you are contemptible. So, notice this, your name will no longer be perpetuated. Whose name would, though, in the wake of Assyria's defeat? Or through Israel, it'd be God's name. The God that had delivered them again and again. He says, now, you'll recognize this. Behold on the mountains the feet of him who brings good news, who announces peace. Celebrate your feasts, O Judah. Pay your vows. For never again will the wicked one pass through you. He is cut off completely. That sounds pretty similar to what we find in the book of Isaiah concerning the one who would come to preach the gospel. The glad tidings of good things that Paul quoted in Romans chapter 10 from the book of Isaiah. But it's just, again, this is a typical thing that they would say, the one who brings good news. This is good news of their delivery from a captivity or an affliction. Similarly, this is what Jesus means in Matthew chapter 23, in the very last passage, when he says, For I say to you, from now on you will not see me until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. In other words, they would be looking for one to save them from Rome, but he would never come. They'd be saying, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, waiting for that man to top the hill with the accompanying army to relieve them from their destruction, and it never would happen. All right. There's Nahum is very straightforward. There's not much mystery about Nahum in terms of just understanding the gist of what's going on. Okay, there's a lot of mystery behind when it was written and who Nahum was and things like that, but the book itself is fairly straightforward. God's angry. He's going to destroy Nineveh, and you better stick with him and not lose your faith. It's basically the whole book. You can probably read it in about 10, 15 minutes, if that, maybe less than that actually, and get all that from there. But does anybody have any comments on Nahum chapter 1? Anything jump out at you?
That last verse, how much it really ties into the coming of the Messiah and what he would do, how he would read. How the name would be changed. They no longer would look at their name, but the name of God. How the Messiah, his birthright, how he came into being.
Right, there are some similarities there, of course, because this passage is found almost word for word in Isaiah 52, and that's the passage that's quoted by Paul in Romans 10. And so there is some strong similarities there for sure. Jimmy, did you have something?
Well, I was just going to comment that it's almost uncountable the amount of prophets that if you look at them and dissect them just overall, they're all about the same. You've sinned, you haven't repented, and now it's coming to an end.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Or with Jerusalem or Israel, the Jews just kept, okay, we got to be good now. No, we can't be good no more. Oh, yeah, we're going to be good. No, we can't be good anymore.
Yeah, it's the whole thing.
If you really look at it, though, what's really a book that really illustrates that is the Judges. The book of the Judges, you see how they just up and down, how Israel will do good for a while and then it will go down.
Right.
And God would afflict them, and then they would cry to God, and then God would send them another judge, and they'll do good for a while, and then they'll go back down again. It was like a roller coaster, up and down. And God would just send them judge after judge until the judges were no more.
You can follow the history of Israel with these 4 letters, S-O-R-D. You can kind of remember it like sword, but you just have to remember to take the W out, basically. But sin, oppression, repentance, and deliverance. Sin, oppression, repentance, and deliverance. That's kind of the cycle of the judges, and really the cycle of a lot of Israel's history. And so this is not what we have in Nahum, but the language is similar concerning Nineveh, except with Nineveh, they're not going to raise back up in the future like Israel would. All right, Nahum chapter 2. The one who scatters has... Oh,
Yeah, I'm just saying, a lot of them places didn't rise back up.
oh right.
Right, they were destroyed. And later on, you see, what's called come into the history. And he made sure things stayed the way they were. Alexander.
Right. Alexander, then especially Antiochus IV Epiphanes. He was very brutal against Israel.
I thought Assyria, but Assyria should have been that way, the way Assyria did be. You know, but later on they came back. So.
But not to afflict
Yeah, no,
Israel in
Alexander
this.
did things differently.
Right.
He sort of brought him into his fold.
And then he tried to change them.
Yeah.
Tried to change them.
Convert him over.
This is the blueprint for Rome. And you look at Rome kind of adopted what the Greeks were doing, because they would, although they conquered nations, they would assimilate nations into themselves.
Right.
Alexander had a theory of idea of conquering the whole world, and conquering the whole world, not just bringing them into submission up under them, but actually assimilating them into Greek.
Alexander Greek. Right.
He wanted to educate the world by I guess incorporating them into his structure.
Yeah, it's called Hellenization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where all your libraries and all that. So he believed strongly in educating people.
Yep. Unfortunately, the Library of Alexander was burned
Yeah.
because they say that if that institution would have remained, we would be, hundreds of years ahead of where we are now in terms of technology and knowledge, because most of the world's knowledge was contained within that library.
Yeah, that's why a lot of countries want to get into all this stuff of fighting wars with all this nuclear stuff later on in the year, but they put a stop to it because they were saying a lot of history was being destroyed, libraries and things, because we know the Egyptians long before then were doing surgery on the eyes and stuff like that. And it's some recently in this century, last century this century started doing cataract surgery, but the Egyptians were doing stuff like that way back then.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, they had a lot of fine tools and stuff like that. Once you studied like archaeologists and stuff like that, read stuff about that. The Egyptians was way ahead. They were doing brain surgeries and stuff like that.
Whew. I don't know. I wouldn't want to be a part of that.
Yeah, but they were doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Nahum chapter 2. The one who scatters has come up against you. Man the fortress, watch the road, strengthen your back, summon all your strength. For the Lord will restore the splendor of Jacob, like the splendor of Israel, even though devastations have devastated them and destroyed their vine branches. So he's encouraging them. You're going to be able to stand strong in this. God's going to rescue you from the Assyrians. The shields of his mighty men are colored red. The warriors are dressed in scarlet. The chariots are enveloped in flashing steel. When he is prepared to march, and the cypress spears are brandished. The chariots race madly in the streets. They rush wildly in the squares. Their appearance is like torches. They dash to and fro like lightning flashes. He remembers his nobles. They stumble in their march. They hurry to her wall, and the mantlet is set up. The gates of the river are opened, and the palace is dissolved. It is fixed. She is stripped. She is carried away, and her handmaids are moaning like the sound of doves beating on their breasts. So you have in Nahum, in Nahum chapter 2, God telling Israel, Get your strength up. You're going to be able to win this. It's going to be scary. It's going to look tough. But God's going to be with you, and God's going to win this battle for you. Her gates are going to be opened up. The gates of the rivers are opened, and the palace is dissolved. This whole thing is going to come crashing down. You are going to be victorious in the end. In verse 8, he says, though Nineveh was like a pool of water throughout her days, now they are fleeing. Stop, but no one turns back. Plunder the silver, plunder the gold, for there is no limit to the treasure. Wealth from every kind of desirable object. She is emptied, yes, she is desolate and waste. Hearts are melting and knees knocking. You can kind of picture that, can you? Also anguish in the whole body. All their faces are grown pale. I mean, this is a nation that's the mightiest in the world that is taken by total surprise at her devastation, totally unsuspected. You can picture there the chariots flashing to and fro, trying to get to their proper positions. The noblemen stumbling over each other as they try to get to the walls fast enough, but it doesn't work. It's too late. They're going to come crashing down. He says, where is the den of the lions and the feeding place of the young lions? Where the lion, lioness, and lion's cub proud, with nothing to disturb them? The lion toreth enough for his cubs, killed enough for his lionesses, and filled his lairs with prey and his dens with torn flesh. Behold, I am against you, declares the Lord of hosts. I will burn up her chariots in a smoke. A sword will devour your young lions. I will cut off your prey from the land, and no longer will the voice of your messengers be heard. In other words, they were like lions. They had they're kings of the jungle, basically. And what he says is, you're going to be destroyed. Your chariots are going up in smoke. Your swords are going to melt. Your young lions are going to be devoured. Your city walls are going to fall. Everything's going to come crashing down. You're not going to have any more help at all. In fact, the messengers that proclaimed the good news, so to speak, of Nineveh were going to come to an end as well. Their whole system was going to crash down overnight, and there was nothing they'd be able to do about it. What are your thoughts on Nahum chapter 2? Like I said, it's fairly straightforward. It's just, hey, your guys are going to get destroyed. There's not a lot of deep theological, substance to Nineveh, to Nahum, besides just trying to paint this message to Israel that you guys got to stay strong. God is going to destroy the mightiest nation in the world. Judgment is going to come upon them, and there's nothing they can do about it. Right?
Was that Nineveh that they were saying about the walls were so thick and all that?
Let's see. That would have been Jericho. Well, that's one of them at least, where the chariots would go across 6 at a time, I think.
So then you would race around the walls and stuff like that.
Right, Jericho.
But wasn't Babylon walls?
All the walls in ancient history think like that.
I thought it was Nimrod one that was so that anything nothing.
Well, I'm sure they were as well, being as mighty as they were. But the one that comes to my mind when you said that was Jericho, where they specifically had all the people even lived within the walls that are so thick.
Okay.
But Nineveh could have been the same way. We have to research into that and see.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's go ahead and get chapter 3 here and keep going. Notice what they're going to be punished for here. He says, woe to the bloody city, completely full of lies and pillage. Her prey never departs, the noise of the whip, the noise of the rattling of the wheel, galloping horses and bounding chariots. Now, think about what we studied earlier in Leviticus 25. On that 7th year, the sabbatical year, everyone, whether they were foreigners or slaves or servants or whatever, could participate in the eating of the good of the land together on an equal level, right? They weren't supposed to hoard it and sell it and anything like that. Just everybody comes and eats of it freely. Okay? When you look at Nahum chapter 3, do you see the contrast between Assyria and Jerusalem? At least how Jerusalem was supposed to be. A city that's filled with the noise of whips and the rattling chariots and the galloping horses. I mean, this is a city built on domination and power and oppression. And so he says this bloody city is going to be taken down. Horsemen clanging, swords flashing, spears gleaming, many slain, a mass of corpses and countless dead bodies. They stumble over the dead bodies. And this nation is just one of death and destruction. He says this is all because of the many harlotries of the harlot, the charming one, the mistress of sorceries, who sells nations by her harlotries and her families by her sorceries. So this is picturing Assyria, kind of like Jerusalem is pictured mainly in Hosea as well as in Revelation, as they had in their idolatry worship women that were basically cultic prostitutes, and it was a way of worship that they saw in some of their pagan rituals. And so he's comparing this nation as the one who charms the other nations with the promise of wealth and prosperity and power, and all it does though is bring about destruction and death. Okay. Verse 5, he says, "Behold, I am against you, declares the Lord of hosts. I'll lift up your skirts over your face, and I'll show to the nations your nakedness, and to the kingdoms your disgrace. I will throw filth on you, and make you vile, and set you up as a spectacle. And it will come about that all who see you will shrink from you, and say, Nineveh is devastated. Who will grieve for her? Where will I seek comforters for you?" So basically, he's going to take the beauty of Nineveh and turn it on its head. So you think this is so great? Look how she really is underneath. Look how they really are in the light of the day. Okay, they can get away with this in the darkness, but when it comes daytime, their ugliness is really seen. So he's going to expose Nineveh for who they really are. And as he says there in verse 7, no one's going to grieve for her. No one's going to come and comfort her. She's going to be completely destroyed without any help and without any friend. All right. Let's keep going. Verse 8. Are you better than Nahum? This is the city of Thebes. This is the one that was destroyed in 663 that they mark the dating of the book by. So this is why it has to be destroyed why it has to be written after 663, because he's saying that this other city of Nineveh, or rather of Assyria, was destroyed earlier. Are you better than they are? Okay. It says, which was situated by the waters of the Nile, with water surrounding her, whose rampart was the sea, whose wall consisted of the sea. Whatever. Let's keep going. Ethiopia. Do what?
Some of the writers during that time wrote about Thebes, a country that Thebes.
Right.
They had a lot in some of the plays and stuff, especially about Shakespeare and some of them.
About the Egyptian town.
Yeah, that's what I meant, Egyptian. Let's see. Let me look it up real quick. Thebes. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, in 663, the city of Thebes was sacked by the hands of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. All right? And they were in war with Egypt. So the point is what I meant to say, is that here, this was an Egyptian town that they destroyed that was mighty and looked at as being impenetrable. But they were able to do it. He says, are you going to be better than them? You destroy them, and I'm going to destroy you like you destroyed them. It's the idea here. All right, I got my words mixed up there. Okay. And you see that? The water surrounding her, rampart was the sea, wall consisted of the sea. That strategical location seemed to be unget-overable, but Assyria did it, and they were going to do it too. They were going to have it done to them, rather. Ethiopia, he says, was her might. Egypt too, without limits. Put and Luban were among her helpers, yet she became an exile. She went into captivity. Her small children were dashed to pieces at the head of every street. They cast lots for her honorable men. All her great men were bound with fetters. So he says, you too. So just like you did this to them, this is going to be done to you by these other nations, Babylon and the Medes, that are going to come against you. He says, you too will become drunk. You will be hidden. You too will search for a refuge from the enemy. All your fortifications are fig trees with ripe fruit. When shaken, they fall into the eater's mouth. You know, Jesus used a fig tree to talk about Israel as well in the New Testament. Behold, your people are women in your midst. The gates of your land are open wide to your enemies. Fire consumes your gate bars. Draw for yourself water for the siege. Strengthen your fortifications. Go into clay and tread the mortar. Take hold of the brick mold. In other words, do your best to fortify. It's not going to help at all.
Back up.
All right?
Behold, your people are women in your midst. Is he saying that as far as your armies are not, or what is the reference to women there? I don't get
They're weak. They're no men. They're
Okay. That's
So,
what I thought it was.
during this time, they all the soldiers were men, right? And so, for example, Paul said, "Quit you like men, be strong." So the soldiers were men, and the women were not at this time. And so, what he's saying is, all your soldiers are going to be like the women.
That's what it was, but I wanted to clarify.
Not trained in combat, didn't have that years of military strength that they built up. The same thing is said about Egypt in Isaiah 19. In that day, the Egyptians will become like women. They will tremble and be in dread because of the waving of the hand of the Lord of hosts, which is going to wave over them. So they're going to basically, despite all their training, it's going to be for naught. So this is what he tells them to do. Draw for yourselves water for the siege. Strengthen your fortifications. Go into the clay and tread the mortar. Take hold of the brick and mold. He's basically mocking them here. You go ahead and prepare for this. It's not going to help you at all, but you can do it. Then he says, their fire will consume you. The sword will cut you down. It will consume you as the locust does. So now he says this to the conquering armies who are going to conquer Assyria. Multiply yourself like the creeping locust. Multiply yourself like the swarming locust. You have increased your traders more than the stars of heaven. The creeping locust strips and flies away. In other words, you've done all these wonderful things. These locusts are going to come and just devour you. Your guardsmen are like the swarming locusts. Your marshals are like the hordes of grasshoppers settling in the stone walls on a cold day. The sun rises and they flee, and the place where they are is not known. When I pictured this, we had a long driveway about half a mile long or so, maybe a little bit less than that, and it winded up through the cow pasture on top of a hill where we had a fence built, and our house sat in the middle. And we, instead of running around, instead of when the bus dropped us off for school, instead of walking all up the driveway, we would just do a straight shot right through the pasture, And when you do that, I don't know if you've ever done that before, what happens as you're running through a field?
You need to watch where you're walking.
Yeah.
Well, you got to watch where you're walking, which we knew the landscape like the back of our hands, but what is that? No, I'm kidding. No, I was kidding.
What?
You know the landscape like the back of your hand. Well, anyways, when you're running through the field, I said, the landscape like the back of your hand, and then I looked, and what is that? So, real quick, when you're running through the field, all these grasshoppers are just going, whoof, off to the side. And so this is what it's looking like. Basically, your guardsmen are going to just scatter when the sun comes up. Lonnie?
Yeah, I was just thinking that, do you know how many people, I say in the church, that are not being taught the Old Testament? That's quite a lot. And ever since I've had become a member of the church, I always try to get preachers to teach the Old Testament, not
Right.
preach, just teach it as it is. But no one would ever do it. And everywhere where I go, I never hear anybody even teach the Old Testament. And I think a lot of people got the idea that God has changed and that we have a merciful God, we got a good God, and nothing bad gonna happen to us. But they need to study and see the long suffering God in the Old Testament. How long he waited for his people to change. But he still dealt with them. I don't care. We need to realize today too that God's gonna deal with us. We need to stop some of the stuff we're doing and do what God wants us to do. And
Like what?
there's many things that we do sometimes and think we're getting away with it. You sit back and you see a lot of people doing things. And they think nothing of it. But God gonna deal with us one day.
What's a good example of that? You got an example for us?
The Bible teaches us to forgive people, right?
Right.
And many of us, we don't do that. You know, we don't forgive nobody. And we hold it against them. And we need to let things go, you know, and realize that what God said in his book, he meant it. And sometimes, but we got a merciful God. And that's the same thing a lot of people in the world think too. And we think the same way in the church. Because we haven't changed yet. Many of us haven't changed. And we don't know if we don't be about the Lord's business, he'll deal with us later. You know when it says forgive, that's what it means. And a lot of people think you gotta forget it. You can't forget nothing. It means that don't go back and hash it up again. You know, because it says God forgive. Right, God forgive, but he always reminded people, I don't care if 1,000 years, 100 years later, he come back and said, I took you out of Egypt. But he's talking about their forefathers and stuff like that. But he remind them the things he did for that nation, right? And that's the same thing. You could remind people of things, but you don't go back and hash it up to use it against them. You know what I'm talking about? If a person treats you wrong in a certain way, you could remind the person, you did this to me. But you forget things and forgive a person when they do you wrong. You know what I'm talking about? And you just go on. But we said things sometimes that hurt people and we think nothing of going back and repenting. Said things to other people, think nothing of it. And thank God is overlooking things like that. And then we don't get out and socialize with people to try to win them over. You know, and stuff like that. And I get frustrated to see the things that have been going on in the church. I see the church being destroyed by people that are supposed to be leaders. And they're just drilling down to nothing. And people, the Lord knows it like it's there. You know what I'm talking about?
It's true that the tongue is, as James says, a small member, but he kindles a large fire.
Right.
And one of the things that destroys the church, I agree with you, is is rumors and backbiting and stuff like that.
Right.
It's a deadly disease that needs to be stamped out.
We need to stop that foolishness.
Yep.
And the Bible teaches us, if we got something against somebody, go to that person.
Right,
That
exactly.
person, and you don't go around talking about it.
Exactly.
We
And
need to stop all this foolishness.
it's cowardly, isn't it? When people go and talk about someone behind their back without having any substance to it. Or even if they do have substance to it. It's just, it's unbecoming of a Christian to do that kind of thing.
We have to realize who we gave our life to.
You don't really even have to, and I know you need to study the Old Testament.
Right.
It's the basic, but you don't need to go to the Old Testament. If you know the New Testament, it teaches you about the principles that Lonnie just reiterated. So I mean, if a person didn't know anything but the New Testament,
They should still know better, right? Yeah.
It still teach you how to love one another,
Right.
teach you how to treat one another, teach you how
Yeah.
to be.
I'm not
That
bringing
Old
out
Testament
that-
has nothing.
I'm not bringing out that point by loving and all that. I'm bringing out the point that people need to be taught the Old Testament to see how God dealt with people. And see, we teach, ever since I've been in church, we've been teaching the New Testament. And we teaching all the good things. But we need to go and teach some of the bad things that happen to people. And if he dealt with people then, how are you going to deal with us in the future, in this life? You know what I'm talking about? Not in the next life, but this life. And we have
Right.
problems sometimes, and we don't know why these problems come up. It could be the way we live. And so we need to stop some of the stuff we are doing as Christians. I think we need to be, in a way, talked to, in a sense, to when a person is, if we know is doing something wrong, we need to go to that person and talk to them and try to encourage them to do better.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about? And no sense you're going around behind somebody's back talking about it.
Well, let's make a pledge to the congregation that anytime we have something against each other, we go right to the person. How about that? Does that sound good to everybody?
That's anything. Number one, I've seen so many things that we have attempted to do and said we're going to do it, and it never come to fruition.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about? And it's all talk. We need to put it into action.
I agree. All right. Let's finish up Nahum right now. We only got a few verses left,
Okay.
and then we'll hop back into it. Okay.
We do this too much in the church. We just come in here and we sound off, and we air our complaints over and over again. And some of us, I think, don't really like one another. To tell you the truth, from my listening to the comments and stuff, I think it's a personal thing with it. That some of us just don't like certain part of people in the church. And if we listen to what we're saying, we're the biggest stumbling block of all. Because we got all these grievances, but we ain't doing nothing about it. We're not going to the people. We're not
Right.
showing love to one of the other people. But we use these classes just to sound off and just say what other people are not doing. What are you doing? You need to, if you're gonna put your complaints about it, make sure that you're doing something. Make sure that you're not guilty of what you're saying yourself, because otherwise, it's just like looking in a mirror. You're more guilty than anybody else. We all got our shortcomings. We all can do better.
That's right. We all can.
We all can do. Let's just say it is. We all can do better in the service of the Lord. Don't try to put it on just a certain set of people.
Right.
Look at yourself first.
And that's what we learned in our Bible class this morning from Matthew, in Matthew 23. Yes, sir.
I take this personally. I know what I've done. I know what I do.
Oh, okay.
And I try to get out and socialize.
Yes, sir.
I do things. You be nice to anybody. And I visit.
Yes, sir.
And I can take you to the people. All right? I'm not airing out anything.
Okay.
I see other people, and we need to look at people as a soul.
Right.
And we are not doing that. This is what bothers me. We don't look at a person as that's a soul to win. And we treat the people bad, and we talk about, I'm not talking about members of the church, I'm talking about non-members. You know what I'm talking about? And we get in our little crowd and we talk, and then we got a friend, but that friend is a friend to somebody else, and they go back and tell what you said. You know what I'm talking about? It's hearsay, but you don't bother hearsay stuff, but I'm saying, this is the things that be happening. And a lot of hearsay goes around. But I exercise what I talk and believe. I put forth an effort to show it. I don't just say something.
In my time here, a lot of the things we've talked about tonight about rumors and hearsay and things like that, I'm not going to mention any names or anything, but it's amazing how many rumors I've heard about just things going on within people in our congregation. And I always just wonder, are the people that are telling me these rumors even realize what they're doing? Why don't they just go to the person? And I heard some very, very wicked and nasty stuff about people. And you just think to yourself, how could a brother or sister in Christ say such things about somebody else? And so, that's something that it doesn't just go on outside, but it goes on even within our walls at times, and we got to stomp that out. Jimmy, what were you going to say, buddy?
I don't know that I've ever heard any of that here.
Well,
Maybe I'm missing out.
Well, let's go to McDonald's. I'll tell you. No, what happens, Jimmy? Though is I guess Gary, for instance. A lot of people go to Gary and talk to Gary, and a lot of people come to me and talk to me when they have issues and concerns. And so, a lot of times, though, you never see those people interacting with others that they have issues with. So that's really what I was. All right, here we go. Nahum chapter 3. Let's get this. We're almost done. We got 2 verses left. We can do it.
Let's do it.
All right, verse 18. He says, "Your shepherds are sleeping, O king of Assyria." That's exactly what. Whoa, is it 6 o'clock? How did that happen? All right. I honestly thought it was like 5:40 getting
Because
to the
you've been
time.
having so much fun.
Well, this is exactly what Jeremiah told the shepherds of Israel. Remember? He says, your shepherds are going to be taken away, and we're going to bring up other shepherds, okay? Your nobles are lying down. Your people are scattered on the mountains, and there is no one to regather them. This is kind of what the prophets of Baal were saying to Elijah. If you remember that back there when they had the sacrificial sort of competition there. He said, your God must be, rather this is what Elijah was saying to them. Oh, your God must be sleeping. He must be out hunting. He can't hear you. One of the little phrases they said is a euphemism for he must be using the bathroom. Have you heard about that before? And so when Elijah's talking to the prophets of Baal, one of the things that he says is an old style euphemism for, well, he must be in the bathroom and can't hear you. Yeah, and now this brings us to wonder, are we sleeping? Are we lying down? Are we taking care of the flock of God? Are we doing our good in the world that we ought to be doing? He says, there is no relief for your breakdown. Your wound is incurable. All who hear about you will clap their hands over you, for on whom has not your evil passed continually? And it just ends right there. In other words, Assyria, you think everybody just loves you and cares for you? Once your ability to give them stuff goes away, nope, no more, right? They're gonna clap their hands over you. They're gonna look for the next person who's gonna give them their handout. And so, this whole book, that was Nahum, the whole book, and it's all straightforward. But the whole point of it is, you are a wicked nation. You have despised my teachings. You despised the correction I've offered you before. You are a bloody city who's destroyed people and taken advantage of them, and you're going to come to an end. Israel, you got to stay strong. Judah, you be ready. You're going to be able to conquer them. Just be patient. And that's the point of the book of Nahum. Really straightforward book, but again, one of the tools that it gives us to understanding the New Testament is the language that's used in connection to the judgment of Jerusalem. The earth burning, the world coming to an end, the mountains quaking, all that kind of stuff is language we need to familiarize ourselves with, so it doesn't confuse us so much when we read the New Testament. All right, real quick, Ashley, what you got?
I just think it's interesting. Some of the books we study where it's kind of like judge and jury, like you did this, like oh we do this, we did this,
Right.
But this particular book, it's like the whole book is that about you did this, and then the last verse is who can we find that can't say that you've just been continually bad? Like
Right.
Anybody reading this book is just like, well, you can't feel sorry for them at all because it's just like nothing,
Right.
no good thing.
It's like when you listen to a court case on TV, like one that's nationally televised, someone that committed some atrocity, and you're just sitting there going, yeah, how are they even going to answer this, right? That's how I feel sometimes when I listen to my friend Don debate against this one guy. I listen to it every now and then, and the guy just doesn't even know what to say when he gets back up because Don has just totally dealt with everything that he had to say. But it's the same way, there is no answer to that. Nineveh had no excuse. I mean, everybody that was anybody knew what was going on, and so there's just no denying it, All right. It is.
This is the nature of Nineveh. Remember, Nineveh was going to be destroyed before this.
Right.
And apparently Nineveh had been a very bad place before, but God gave them opportunity to repent, and they did.
I believe it was in chapter 1. It said one has risen up, this wicked one that's come in. Mm-hmm. There was a new king that had come up now that had led them into more evil and was unwilling to, is the way I see it.
I think it was Gary said go back and read the account of how Nineveh, when they took the northern kingdom into captivity, how they slaughtered all the men and led the women away with fish hooks through their noses.
Right.
They were very brutal nation.
Unnecessarily brutal. There's a difference between winning a war and just totally taking advantage of and abusing the people. When it's like Rome. They just didn't conquer. They burned the land behind them and sowed salt in it so that nothing could be planted there for years and years and years. I mean, just totally over the top in their conquering. And so this is what we have with Assyria as well. All right, I'm gonna cut this off real quick.